Title: Dolly's Deceit, a tale of a haunted companion. I had always been a sucker for collecting oddities. Old coins, vintage postcards, and antique dolls were my weaknesses. One day, my search led me to a dusty corner of a local thrift shop where I found a peculiar doll with a note that read, "Dolly, the companion you never knew you needed." The doll was different from any I'd seen before. Its porcelain face was exquisite, with a delicate smile that seemed to beckon me closer. Its eyes, however, held a chilling intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Despite the unease it stirred within me, I couldn't resist bringing Dolly home. As I placed the doll on a shelf in my study, I couldn't help but chuckle at my own silliness. A haunted doll, I mused. Who falls for such stories? But as days turned into weeks, odd things began to happen. It started with subtle shifts, Dolly moving from one end of the shelf to the other. I brushed it off, blaming it on vibrations from passing trucks. But soon, Dolly's eerie gaze seemed to follow me around the room, and her position shifted when I wasn't looking. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, I returned to find Dolly sitting on my desk, holding a tiny note that read, "Feeling stressed? Let me help." Beneath the note was a small vial of what looked like lavender oil. I chuckled at the thought of a haunted doll offering aromatherapy. I decided to play along, rubbing a drop of the oil on my temples. Almost immediately, a soothing calm washed over me. I couldn't believe it. Maybe there was something to this after all. Days turned into a comfortable routine. Dolly seemed to anticipate my needs, leaving little notes and tokens that always managed to make me smile. It was like having a quirky, albeit unsettling, friend by my side. I began to share my thoughts and worries with Dolly, half expecting a whispered response. One stormy night, as rain lashed against my window, I sat with Dolly by my side. "What's your story, Dolly?" I asked, half jokingly. A soft breeze seemed to rustle the curtains, and I laughed at my own overactive imagination. But then the lights flickered, and a shadow seemed to dance across the room. My laughter faded as a cold dread settled in. I glanced at Dolly, and her porcelain lips seemed to curve into a knowing smile. "Did you do that, Dolly?" I whispered. A gust of wind slammed the window shut, causing me to jump. And then a voice. A whisper that slithered through the air, barely audible, yet unmistakably there. "I've been waiting." I shot up from my chair, my heart pounding. I had never heard anything like it. My rational mind screamed that it was just my imagination, that Dolly was just a doll. But a primal fear gripped me, and I rushed to the shelf, grabbing Dolly and clutching her to my chest. The night dragged on, each creak of the floorboards and every gust of wind amplifying my terror. Dolly remained silent, her porcelain smile never wavering. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I drifted into a fitful sleep, Dolly still in my arms. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, dispelling the shadows of the night. I looked down at Dolly, half expecting her to look innocent and ordinary once more. But her gaze held a new intensity, a hunger that seemed to reach into the depths of my soul. That was the moment I knew I had to part ways with Dolly. I found a specialist who dealt with haunted artifacts, and without hesitation, I handed her over. As I watched the specialist place Dolly into a protective case, she turned to me with a grave expression. "Be cautious when you let such entities into your life," she warned. "Some friendships can be deceptive." As I walked away from the shop, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I had escaped the clutches of a haunted doll that had somehow managed to intertwine itself with my life. And yet, a part of me wondered, had Dolly truly been malevolent, or had my own fears and expectations shaped her into something more sinister? To this day, I can't help but glance at dolls in thrift shops with a mix of curiosity and caution, and I've learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the most alluring companions can hide the darkest secrets. The Disappearing Hikers, a spooky adventure gone wrong. It was a crisp autumn morning when my friends and I set out on our much-anticipated hiking trip. The woods ahead held an air of mystery, their dense foliage painting an eerie yet enthralling landscape. We were a group of 5: Alex, the adventure enthusiast, Emma, the skeptic, Mike, the jokester, Lisa, the nature lover, and myself, Chris, the organizer. Our destination was a secluded forest rumored to be a haven for avid hikers. It was said that those who ventured into its depths often disappeared without a trace. Of course, we laughed off the tales as local legends meant to add an extra thrill to our journey. But as we walked deeper into the woods, the uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach grew stronger. "Chris, are you sure about this?" Emma's voice trembled slightly as she looked around nervously. I shrugged, attempting to hide my own unease. "Come on, Emma, it's just a spooky story. We'll be fine." We followed a narrow trail that seemed to wind deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees loomed tall above us, their branches casting long, spindly shadows that danced eerily in the dappled sunlight. It wasn't long before the forest seemed to close in around us, muffling the sounds of the outside world and filling the air with an unsettling silence. As we walked, the atmosphere became more tense. The forest seemed to shift, as if it were alive and watching us. A rustling in the underbrush would make us jump, and the laughter that had filled the air at the start of our journey now felt forced and hollow. Mike, ever the joker, attempted to lighten the mood with a ridiculous ghost story. Legend has it that the ghost of a lost hiker roams these woods, searching for his missing sock. Lisa chuckled weakly, but I noticed her grip on her hiking stick had tightened. "That's not funny, Mike." We walked for what felt like hours, the path winding and twisting unpredictably. My phone's GPS seemed to have gone haywire, displaying only static and meaningless symbols. Panic began to claw at the edges of my mind, but I did my best to push it away. Eventually, we stumbled upon a small clearing, the ground covered in a thick carpet of leaves. It was then that we noticed something odd, a collection of worn-out backpacks scattered haphazardly across the ground. Our laughter died in our throats as we realized the chilling truth. These were the backpacks of the hikers who had disappeared over the years. This can't be real," Alex stuttered, his face pale. We exchanged uneasy glances, the realization that we were no longer alone in these woods settling over us like a heavy fog. Suddenly, the wind picked up, and a low, mournful howl echoed through the trees. We spun around trying to locate the source of the sound, but all we saw were the swaying branches and the shifting shadows. "We need to leave now," Emma's voice was quivering. Agreeing wholeheartedly, we turned to retrace our steps, only to find that the trail had disappeared. Panic bubbled up inside me, threatening to consume me whole. My heart raced, and I felt a cold sweat beat on my forehead. The forest seemed to have closed in around us, its familiarity turning into a sinister maze designed to trap us. "We're lost," I muttered, my voice barely audible. The wind howled again, louder this time, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a hiker, dressed in tattered clothes, his face obscured by a hood. He stared at us with hollow eyes, his gaze sending shivers down my spine. "Lost souls like me," he whispered, his voice carrying on the wind. Without another word, we turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, crashing through the underbrush, desperately trying to find a way out. The forest seemed to twist and shift, the landscape morphing in impossible ways, leading us in circles. The hikers' haunting laughter echoed around us, as if the very forest itself was mocking our attempts to escape. Hours turned into an eternity as we stumbled through the woods, exhaustion and terror gnawing at our minds. Just as hope was fading, we burst through the tree line and found ourselves on the edge of a road. Relief flooded through us, and we collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for breath. Looking back at the woods, we saw nothing but darkness. The hiker was gone, as if he had never existed. As we caught our breath, a police car pulled up, its siren wailing. "You folks all right?" the officer asked, his concerned eyes scanning our disheveled group. We tried to explain what had happened, but our words sounded like the ramblings of madmen. The officer exchanged a knowing look with his partner, as if they had heard this story 100 times before. "Y'all are lucky," he said, shaking his head. "The woods can play tricks on your mind, especially this time of year. Best to stay on marked trails." As the officers drove away, We were left with a sense of unease that would linger for years. The disappearing hikers had become a chilling reality for us, a nightmare that we had barely escaped. And though we returned to our normal lives, the memory of that day would forever haunt our dreams, a reminder that some legends are born from the darkest corners of reality. Title: Reflections of Desolation. I had always been drawn to the peculiar, the uncanny, and the strange. So when I heard about the mirror that purportedly showed your inner demons, I was both thrilled and intrigued. The rumors about this antique mirror had spread like wildfire through the town. The shopkeepers whisper of its existence, the way its surface seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. It all added to the aura of mystery that surrounded it. The mirror stood in the back corner of a dusty, forgotten antique shop. Its frame was ornate, made of a dark wood that seemed to absorb the light around it. As I approached, my reflection stared back at me, but something was off. My face was contorted into an expression of terror, my eyes filled with an agony I had never experienced. The sight was unnerving, yet I couldn't look away. Hesitating only for a moment, I reached out and touched the cold glass. The moment my fingers made contact, the world around me shifted. The room seemed to warp and twist, the colors blending into a sickening swirl. My reflection changed, no longer my own face, but that of a creature, a monstrous being with twisted features and malevolent eyes. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The mirror had shown me something I couldn't comprehend. Could it be that deep within me, hidden beneath the surface, there was a darkness I hadn't known existed? A sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach as I left the antique shop, the memory of that twisted reflection haunting my thoughts. That night as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. The darkness seemed to press in, and the air grew heavy with a suffocating dread. I turned on the bedside lamp, its feeble glow providing little comfort. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror across the room. My heart pounded as I turned to look. My reflection was distorted again, but this time it was moving, writhing and contorting, its eyes fixated on me with a hungry gaze. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the image remained the same. Fear gnawed at my sanity as I watched my reflection pull itself from the glass, its movements jerky and unnatural. I scrambled out of bed and backed away, my mind racing for an explanation. This couldn't be real. It had to be some sort of hallucination, a trick of the mind. But as the figure stepped out of the mirror, its form solidifying in the dim light, I knew there was no denying the reality of what I was witnessing. The creature resembled me, yet its features were twisted into a grotesque parody. Its skin was pale and mottled, its eyes sunken and filled with a hunger that sent shivers down my spine. It grinned, revealing elongated, serrated teeth that seemed more suited to a predator than a human. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall as the creature advanced toward me. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling. It laughed, a sound that was a twisted echo of my own. "I'm the darkness you try to ignore, the fear you suppress. I am your demon, and I'm finally free." My mind raced, searching for a way to escape. Could I run? Could I fight? But before I could decide, the creature lunged, its fingers like claws reaching for my throat. I barely managed to dodge, the sharp nails grazing my skin. Adrenaline surged through me as I sprinted out of the room, the creature's laughter echoing in my ears. I reached the front door, flung it open, and stumbled out into the night. The cold air bit into my skin, but I didn't stop running. I had to get away, had to find help. As I ran, I could hear the creature's footsteps behind me, its voice whispering in my mind. Taunting, threatening. It was as if my own fears had come to life, and I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually, I found myself in front of the antique shop once again. The mirror stood there, its surface calm and serene, as if nothing had happened. I hesitated, my breath ragged, and then I realized the mirror was the key. It was the source of this nightmare, and it held the power to send the creature back. With a trembling hand, I reached out and touched the mirror's surface. As soon as my fingers made contact, the world around me began to shift and twist once more. The creature's laughter grew distant, and I felt a strange sensation, as if I was being pulled backward through time and space. When I opened my eyes, I was back in front of the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, my own face unchanged. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, relief washing over me. But as I looked into my own eyes, I couldn't help but wonder, had it all been a dream? A hallucination brought on by my fascination with the macabre? I turned away from the mirror, leaving the shop behind. The streets were quiet and still, the night air crisp and calm. And yet, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. As I walked away, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see a twisted reflection staring back at me from the darkness.